And when you give people a little bit of confidence, they're going to continue putting pressure. No one that was pro-Palestine, whether before October 7 or after October 7, was going to turn around and go, all right, I guess it's time to get back to brunch. Palestine has never been a brunch liberal issue. As Steve Witkoff arrives in Israel again.
He'll also want to tackle the deepening humanitarian crisis. And an American doctor working in Gaza has urged Mr.
What is this? All you have to say is classic redirect. The terrorists are the ones taking the money and the food and killing off the Palestinians. Yeah, exactly. They are. The terrorist state of Israel and the ISIS affiliates that the terrorist state of Israel has armed to the teeth. The Popular Forces, as they call themselves, led by illiterate ISIS affiliate drug trafficker Yasser Abu Shabab. Those are the guys who actually loot the aid before it gets to the point of delivery. That's when Israel even allows the aid to get to the point of delivery. But I don't know if that's what you're talking about. But that is what's the reality, okay? That is what's going on, actually. But don't worry. 6 months later, you'll arrive at that conclusion, too, when you go, oh, how could this have happened? Oh, I am, lol. I'm being sarcastic. Okay.
Mr. Witkoff to come and see the situation for himself. And a warning, this report from Sky's Sally Lockwood contains images of those injured in the violence and also malnourished children.
These are scenes it's hoped Trump's envoy reports back to Washington. A hospital in Nusrat.
No, Yasser Abu Shabab is not a New York Crimes article writer. He's a Wall Street Journal article writer. He's an article head, even though he's illiterate, literally dropped out of 2nd grade. Why are you so triggered today? Tooth pain still? No, man, I'm triggered by stupidity. Like, dude, you want to know why I'm still so mad? One, because of what's in front of me, okay? What I've covered for the past 22 months, every single day. That's number one. Number two, even as people come to the recognition that we have been at, okay? Even though people are coming to that recognition slowly, far too slow, their expectation is like that we take them seriously when they turn around and say, oh, well, it's your fault that it took me this long to realize that Palestinians are human beings and they're being starved to death. It's insane. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I welcome you with open arms. I'm so sorry that I made you feel weird. I made you feel weird when you kept defending Israel. I'm so sorry that you had to do side denial because your feelings were hurt or because you were scared about the language that I was using. Oh, no, you were a Holocaust denier? Oh, man. How is this any different than people being like, I got bullied into being a Nazi? People got, the woke side got too woke, and then I became a Hitler-hiling Nazi. Okay, you.
In central Gaza, receiving casualties, reportedly killed and injured, trying to get food from an aid site run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. This father crying over the body of his eldest son. He had a master's degree in political science and international relations, he says, and he died looking like a corpse, crawling to find flour. And this is a story we are seeing every day. People dying trying to get food. People dying because they haven't had any for too long.
I only went to this aid point because my children were starting to look for food on the ground in the street. I've lost 25 kilos. Until now, there's nothing. I have to collect whatever grains and chickpeas I find thrown on the ground. I grind them and eat them.
We're receiving reports like this every day of people dying at aid sites in Gaza. Aid sites backed by America and Israel. Donald Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff is back in Israel for the first time in 3 months, meeting Benjamin Netanyahu, and Israeli media is reporting he may pay a visit to an aid site in Gaza while he's here. It's little coincidence Steve Witkoff is here now. A small but vocal contingent of Donald Trump's base is growing increasingly angry over Gaza. It's felt America, Israel's closest ally, is the only country with the power to pressure Netanyahu to change course. And in an unprecedented move, Arab nations to lay down their weapons and surrender control of Gaza.
This is why it's annoying when the Arab League comes out and is like, the Arab League comes out and as the cowardly allies of Israel and America that they are, and go, hey, after an unprecedented amount of violence, after this live stream that has unfolded against all Palestinians, the death toll probably in the hundreds of thousands at this point, we still don't know. What you should do is surrender your arms and make it easier for Israel to kill you, kill the rest of you. Like, what are we talking about? It's ridiculous. It's also ridiculous when this conversation takes place for Ukraine. And I'm consistent on this position. One of Russia's major points that they've pushed for with Donald Trump was Ukraine to demilitarize. That is completely unacceptable. That is completely ridiculous. And I said it as such. People think, oh, Hasan, you're so pro-Russia, you're so pro-Russia. What do you mean I'm pro-Russia? It's ridiculous. It is insane. You have no sovereignty without arms. So now you got the Arab League saying this. And people don't understand that the Arab League plays this formative role here. It plays the role of America's interest. They are expressing America's desires and Israel's desires here. But of course, people who are not super tuned in to what is going on, that are trying to contend with what's happening here, will go, oh, well, they're Arabs too. Yeah. Moen Rabbani wrote on this. Now that France and Britain, both members of the United Nations Security Council and G7, have indicated they are prepared to recognize the state of Palestine, the dam has burst. Today, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney indicated his government too intends to recognize Palestine during the upcoming session of the UN General Assembly in New York, and a growing number of Western states are adopting or preparing similar positions. It is far from certain whether any of these governments will actually follow through on their statements of intent, and by attaching various conditions to their plans, they've already provided themselves with an escape clause, should they find it necessary to use it. Given that a two-state settlement has been the official position of every one of these governments for several decades, and that a majority of states have already recognized Palestine years, if not decades ago, the question arises as to why Western states have waited so long to recognize the state, without which their proclaimed strategic objective is an impossibility. One reason relates to their domestic politics and the profound transformation of Western public opinion. Brian Tyler Cohen calls the left anti-Semitic. What? I mean, there are a lot of liberal content creators who have cozied up to the likes of a sex pest like Destiny and have been noticeably absent from the conversation when it comes to Israel. Okay? They've been noticeably absent from that conversation. Who cares? One reason is because, like I've also said, the sea change in Western public opinion. The shift has been building over many years, and this is the harvest of a continued, persistent efforts by countless individuals and organizations to bring about changes in official policy. In large parts, thanks to their campaigns, the impact of the Gaza genocide on their public opinion manifested itself much more rapidly and much more broadly than would otherwise have been the case. This change is now irreversible, similar to that experienced by South Africa after the 1960 Sharpeville massacre. In response, governments, this is his Substack, by the way, that he is just like putting out piece by piece. In response, governments have felt compelled to act. Most have chosen the symbolic and comparatively cost-free approach of recognition. They have done so in large part to avoid adopting concrete measures like an arms embargo, trade sanctions, or diplomatic isolation. But in doing so, they've also demonstrated that the pressures generated by protracted public campaigns can and do produce results, and can indeed force governments to change course. And that is precisely why I say this is good, because it expands on the permission. Okay? It shows people, it gives people confidence that their voices do matter a little bit. And when you give people a little bit of confidence, they're going to continue putting pressure. No one that was pro-Palestine, whether before October 7 or after October 7, was going to turn around and go, all right, I guess it's time to get back to brunch. Palestine has never been a brunch liberal issue. As a matter of fact, there are a couple things that I point to in advocacy, in American politics, in the Western world, where someone takes a position that most people refuse to take. Criminal justice reform is one of those issues. When I see someone that is actively advocating to reduce sentences for criminals, to make sure that they have a more humane treatment in prison, I immediately know you're taking on an issue that no one is going to be on board with. Palestine is the other one. Trans issues, to a certain degree, is also in this category, where there are still that gets a little bit convoluted, though, because there are liberals who fake behave like allies and will focus on the optics alone. But like those are some of the few issues. Homelessness too, yes. Like some of the most over people in American society. When I see someone who actually cares about these people, I know that they are taking on a role that most people would not take on. These are some of the most voiceless people, okay, in perpetuity. So this is precisely the reason why the pro-Palestinian crowd is not going to somehow magically stop. They're not the brunch crowd. They're not going to go, okay, well, we got our wishes. There is state recognition for Palestine. No, people are still getting killed. Children are still being starved. There's no way that these guys are going to stop. As a matter of fact, you're giving them confidence to continue. And you should. You should never stop the pressure until Palestine is free. The continuation and intensity are now more justified and necessary than ever. They will now even be more focused on compelling these governments to take active measures to end their complicity in Israel's crimes, to bring these crimes to an end. Just like I said, in 2021, it was a turning point in my experience over the past 12 years that I've been a, open advocate for Palestinian emancipation as a professional media personality. I saw an attitude shift in 2021. It wasn't just because of Israeli depravity in one of their many sieges. It was also because NGOs in unison, including B'Tselem, openly recognized Israel as an apartheid regime. This was a major turning point because this opened up the floodgates. This expanded the permission structure of what you could say without immediately being shut down. Slowly but surely, people tirelessly kept working. Many Palestinians that live in diaspora, many Palestinians that communicate the desires of their immediate family members that are still living in Gaza or the West Bank, they turned around and kept up their advocacy. And slowly but surely, that momentum built. That momentum kept building. Eventually, after October 7, a lot of people tuned into what was going on in Israel. They were shocked. They were horrified by the atrocities that they saw. Okay? But then Israel very quickly dropped all pretext that this was like a justifiable war. And in that process, over the course of the past 22 months, more and more people that have paid attention to the death and destruction that Israel is committed to have begun to recognize that perhaps maybe these guys are exterminationists and they had no reason to do any of these things. And in that process, they learned about the apartheid. In that process, they learned about Zionism. In that process, they learned about the way that Israeli society views these actions. Okay? It's that simple. It takes a long time, but as long as people continue the pressure, more and more people will come on board. That's why I don't immediately cast aside people who are like, I'm a latecomer to this. I'm an ally now, but I'm a latecomer to this. I still have some hangups. Because there was a point in time when there was no one. This was an incredibly lonely cause. Palestinians had no one that advocated for them. Okay? No one. Not even a little bit. That's why I'm always so still to this day shocked by how much support there is for the Palestinian conditions right now. It's obviously still not enough. A liberal Zionist I had once knew IRL recently shared on his social The Guardian open letter for crippling sanctions against Israel. I never imagined I'd see the day when liberal Zionists advocate for BDS. Yeah. Many people did not understand the truth. They did not understand the full extent of the history. But now they do. Toothpaste is out of the tube. Can't put it back in. Cat's out of the bag. A second reason Western governments are not acting on recognition is that Israel's words and actions have backed them into a corner and left them with no choice. For decades, Western governments have treated two-state settlement and Palestinian state not as policies requiring concrete actions in order to bring them about, but rather as political slogans under the cover of which Israel was permitted to turbocharge its efforts to annex Palestinian territory and dispossess its inhabitants with the express purpose of making a two-state settlement impossible, which is precisely what they did. 750,000 Jewish settlers now living in occupied East Jerusalem and also the West Bank. This has made it unmanageable. The two-state solution is a lie. It was just a way to keep pushing the conversation further and further away as Israel continued to displace, ethnically cleanse the land of the Palestinians in the West Bank illegally. It has been a de facto single state, an apartheid state, for quite a while. That's why I call it the so-called peace process. Western governments could deflect pressure to confront its annexationist activities on the pretext that doing so would undermine the Israeli-Palestinian negotiations and thus the consummation of a two-state settlement. The peace process had to be kept alive at all costs. In this Kafkaesque world, the two-state settlement served as a fig leaf for its elimination. As Israel shifted even further to the extreme right, that situation has become increasingly untenable. With the Gaza genocide, it has become simply impossible to sustain as Israeli leaders, all of them today, openly speak of their intention to collectively expel the Palestinians it has not killed yet from the Gaza Strip, to annex the West Bank, and to ensure a Palestinian state is never established. It is official Israeli government policy. In his official statement regarding Canada's new position, Prime Minister Mark Carney explicitly referenced Israel's actions not only in the Gaza Strip, but particularly in the West Bank as justifications. These include accelerated settlement building across the West Bank and East Jerusalem, the E1 settlement plan, and this month's vote by the Knesset calling for the annexation of the West Bank and soaring settler terrorism. That part is actually pretty important. Mark Carney has definitely, regardless of the wishy-washy, both sides bullshit, two-state advocacy that he engaged in, those direct lines of attack against what Israel is doing, naming and shaming the actual policies, was certainly different than what Keir Starmer did, which was the worst out of all of these Western leaders, and definitely better than even Macron, even though Macron had the first Q7, Kid Starver and Macron. What is happening? Jesus Christ, I'm dying. Yeah, the banker actually hit a better line overall. Like its predecessors, Canada recognized that its continued embrace of a two-state settlement and Palestinian statehood while supporting these only with empty slogans had become at best a nonsensical and politically costly. Israeli extremism left Ottawa and other Western capitals with two and only two options: recognize Palestine or endorse formal Israeli annexation. In addition to other factors, last year's International Court of Justice advisory opinion that Israeli rule in occupied territories is illegal and must end as rapidly as possible would have complicated formal recognition of Israeli annexation. A third reason for the recognition of Palestinian statehood is the failure of the alternative formulated by the first Trump administration, Arab-Israeli normalization as a substitute for the Palestinian self-determination. Rather than promote Arab-Israeli normalization as the icing on the cake of a two-state settlement, the grandiloquently entitled Abraham Accords were designed to weaken, isolate, and ultimately marginalize the Palestinians. And that's precisely what they saw. They essentially aimed to remove the question of Palestine from the regional as well as the international agenda with official Arab support. That is one of the major reasons why October 7 happened. This is something that I have brought up when I talked to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She agreed with me on this as well. I don't know where that opinion went after that, but this is precisely the case. The Abraham Accords left Palestinians isolated with no options other than to fight back. This is precisely the reason why October 7 happened. It was a major, major part of the puzzle, major part of the reason beyond the regular Israeli depravity, like the regular policies of Israel that was so devastating for overall Palestinian existence. Okay? That's why I say Trump 1 played a formative role. But the problem is Biden continued Trump 1. Biden continued the Abraham Accords. Biden could have, at some point, put an end to this. Biden could have demanded that Israel scale back, but it didn't, because Biden is just as pro-Israel as Donald Trump is. That's it.
If Trump's envoy does visit Gaza, it's unlikely he'll see here NASA Hospital, where healthy children are fainting from hunger and those with chronic conditions are wasting away from malnutrition. An American pediatrician working here had this response to the claim that there's no famine in Gaza.
This is an absolute lie. This is absolutely not true, because I've seen that with my own eyes. And I would like to have Mr. Witkoff come here and talk to me to my face, and I'll show him.
Just look at this. An aid lorry arriving in Gaza, and it's pure chaos. This is what happens when desperation takes over. It's hoped America's visit will be a moment that finally makes the difference. Sally Lockwood, Sky News, Jerusalem.
I know the topic of Israel is on everyone's mind. I have an update from Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, who I got off the phone with this morning. Special Envoy Witkoff and Ambassador Huckabee had a very productive meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu and other officials today in Israel on the topic of delivering much-needed food and aid to Gaza. President Trump is a humanitarian with a big heart, And that's why he sent Special Envoy Witkoff to the region in an effort to save lives and end this crisis. Tomorrow, Special Envoy Witkoff and Ambassador Huckabee will be traveling into Gaza to inspect the current distribution sites and secure a plan to deliver more food and meet with local Gazans to hear firsthand about this dire situation on the ground. The Special Envoy and the Ambassador will brief the President immediately after their visit to approve a final plan for food and aid distribution into the region, and we will provide more details for all of you once that plan is approved by the President of the United States. On the trade front, the President secured a historic trade agreement with the European Union that puts America first and fundamentally strengthens the economic relationship between the two largest economies in the world. This deal delivers on two of President Trump's core promises on trade, supercharging America's manufacturing capacity and opening up foreign market access to American businesses. The deal guarantees that American businesses will have unprecedented levels of access to the European Union markets to export our American-made goods.
And now over in the United States, splits have started to emerge within the Republican Party over the U.S.'s blanket support of Israel as well due to the worsening humanitarian situation in Gaza, particularly among members of Donald Trump's MAGA base. For more on this story, we can bring in France 24's former Washington correspondent Ketevan Gojasani. Ketevan, great to see you. Tell us about the splits that's emerged.
Well, look, on Monday evening, Marjorie Taylor Greene, a MAGA far-right representative closely allied with Donald Trump, became the first Republican in Congress to use the word genocide to describe.
When Bernie says he doesn't want to call it a genocide, he knows the international legal implications that come along with it. Quite simply, they will stand arm in arm. Institutional Dems avoid the responsibility that comes along with it. Yes, the reason why they won't say it's a genocide is because they recognize their culpability. They recognize that it's illegal to like, it's just impossible, unless you're AOC, to maintain support for a country that you have openly said is doing a genocide. There is no, it's over after that point. It doesn't make sense.
Is happening in Gaza. If we can pull up the post she had on X, she said, it's the most truthful and easiest thing to say that October 7th in Israel was horrific and all hostages must be returned, but so is the genocide, humanitarian crisis, and starvation happening in Gaza. She was responding to a fellow Republican representative, Randy Fine, who had tweeted last week, release the hostages, until then starve away, seemingly talking to the Palestinians. Yesterday, there was another Republican, Thomas Massie. He's more of a critic of Donald Trump, a critic of the pro-Israel lobby, AIPAC, but he is a staunch Republican. He said Israel's war in Gaza is so lopsided that there's no rational argument American taxpayers should be paying for it. These are still minority voices within the Republican Party, especially when it comes to Congress, but it is representative of a shift in the base, in the voters of the Republican Party, and a shift of attitude towards Israel. And you see that especially in the broader MAGA world of the podcasters, the YouTubers, those influencers of MAGA world. Last week, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, he was on set with these two pro-Trump YouTubers, the Nelk boys, very popular with young men, with the young MAGA crowd. There was a huge and unprecedented backlash towards the Nelk boys by their own audience, who are basically accusing them of harboring a war criminal and giving him a platform. You have people like Matt Gaetz, the former MAGA representative, people like Steve Bannon, former advisor to Donald Trump, who are saying that support for Israel is becoming a political liability. And there was the conservative radio host, Megyn Kelly, who I think summed it up pretty well this week. She said, Israel has made itself the villain of the world. They have lost support among their dearest friends.
So what explains the shift that we're seeing?
Well, there are several things that could explain this shift. One, you have to already remember that the Republican Party now is a big tent. You have the traditional GOP, the Grand Old Party, the foreign policy hawks. They see the safety of Israel as a security matter, as key to stability in the Middle East, and therefore in the interest of the United States. They haven't really moved when it comes to Israel. Then you have the evangelicals. They see defending Israel as sort of a biblical duty. And while they still strongly support Israel, they are starting to feel very uncomfortable with the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And even more so when you have Israel, for example, bombing the church in Gaza, or Israeli settlers in the West Bank attacking Christians in the West Bank. You had Mike Huckabee, who cannot be considered someone who's very friendly to the Palestinians, saying that these attacks on Christians in the West Bank were an act of terror. Finally, you have MAGA and the far right. For them, there's a little bit of anti-Semitism in that crowd, obviously, but also it's mostly about America first, that policy, which is basically, we don't care what happens elsewhere. Why should we be